Completed Pennsylvania, October 8th. Home to Frackville in Pennsylvania. We had left home at around 4 o'clock and was only able to drive as far as Frackville in Pennsylvania as we were running low on gas. It was a long drive in the rain and the dark, and we had spent the night looking for an open gas station. It seems that the gas station closes around here around 11 o'clock at night. We got off the highway and found a closed gas station and decided to spend the night here as we were almost out of gas now. October 9th, Route 225 south to Route 147 near Duncannon. It is our 23rd anniversary, and we woke up at a gas station off of Interstate 81 with 35-mile-per-hour winds blowing on the camper. We drove over to the town of Duncannon and looked around where the AT left Duncannon near the Clark Ferry Bridge. There was a large parking lot here. Then we drove over to the Route 225 AT parking lot, and Dave had dropped me off to head south on the trail, and he went back to Duncannon to head north. I hate the drive around because most of the roads here go up and down over the 1,000-feet ridged line that the AT is on. We do not have these kinds of ridges in the part of Connecticut that we live in, so we do not see this as much. I am very nervous going up and down these roads as traffic is flying past you in both directions, as it has a passing lane going up but not on the way down, where they tailgate you and then try to get around you. I crossed a footbridge over Route 225 and entered the woods. The trail was a nice 7-mile section on the ridge line with only mild ups and downs and some very nice views. On my side anyways. However, later I learned that on the side that Dave had to climb up from Duncannon, that there were more rocks on the trail that he had to climb up, but only for about a mile. The wind was blowing up here on the ridgeline at about 35 miles per hour. It was a sunny day, but with a cold wind, I had a pair of winter gloves on for the first hour of my hike this morning. I enjoyed being back on the AT again, first time since our August trip in the wilderness. I had not seen anyone else on the trail except for one local man who was out for a walk with his dog. I had met up with Dave and we stopped to eat our lunch. He had told me that he had seen several hikers going north toward Duncannon, a little late for through hikers. I reached Clark's Ferry shelter and saw a warning inside the shelter that said that a hiker was attacked here in the privy. Food had been disposed of in the privy, which attracted the bear to the privy and the hiker. As I was heading down to Duncannon, I saw a raccoon on the trail. He was just wandering down the trail in front of me. I reached Route 147 and the large parking lot, and then drove over to the Route 225 AT parking lot where we are camping tonight. October 10th, Route 325 south to Route 225. Dave told me that last night some teens had parked next to us and was playing loud music and talking loudly. That was at around midnight. He said that they were there for a while as he was watching his show on his Kindle Fire. They had left after his show had ended, and surprisingly, I had slept through the whole thing. We drove over to the Route 325 AT parking area, and I headed south on the trail. This section of the trail would be a 9.6-mile hiking day, and was a really great day. Blue skies, low temperatures in the 50s with a light wind. We had on our fleece under our rain jacket to keep warm. I also had on my gloves because of the biting winds. I met some Amish people hiking the trail and passed some teens on the trail. I reached a section with rocky ledges, and David called me and said that he was already at the shelter. He told me that he would wait for me. However, I was still a long ways from the shelter, so he said that he would continue on the trail. I passed another great view, and shortly after I had met up with Dave, he is really moving on this trail. We stopped here to eat our lunch. We used our Esbit stove to heat up some water for tea and ate some dehydrated chicken strips that Dave had made at home. They were delicious. I reached Peter's Mountain Shelter. It was a nice new larger shelter made out of wood with a large upper sleeping area. There was a metal sign on the shelter wall that dedicated the shelter to Peter's barber by his family. I reached Table Rock View, a pretty awesome view on top of a rocky ledge of the woodlands below. Then I reached a power line clearing with more views. I really liked this section, with more great views up here of the Pennsylvania farmlands and woodlands. The sun was warm at around 2 o'clock, I was thinking that this was the best day ever so far. I finally reached the parking lot, and Dave was already here. There were also some Amish people in the parking lot that were waiting for their ride. We had little cell phone signal here, so it was difficult to reach each other. Dave had told me that he had tried to call me when he had got off the trail and again when he reached the parking lot. October 11th, Sand Spring Trail, south to Route 325. We had a nice night here last night next to a stream and woke up to a cold 43 degrees morning. Dave dropped me off on Sand Spring Trail, and he was going to start from the AT parking lot off of Route 325. This section of the trail from Route 325 north to Route 443 was too long to do on a day hike, even when we hiked separately, so we would have needed to backpack this section. So I had looked up this section of the AT on the web, and this Sand Spring Trail was halfway between the two roads. Well, I had got onto this trail, and I thought that I was on the Sand Spring Trail. It had started at a gate with a yellow blaze painted on the gate. We had hugged each other before Dave had left to go to the AT and start his hike to the north. Well, things had not gone the way that I had thought that it would go. I had hiked into a grassy area that looked like an old logging road with some faded yellow blazes on some trees. I reached a stream and did not see any more blazes around. After about 15 minutes of bushwhacking through the woods looking for a blaze, I decided to turn around and head back to the road to see where I last saw a blaze. I had a lot of trouble finding my way back to the road because it was all logged, so I could not tell which way I had come in from. When I finally reached where I had started, I retraced my hike, following the faded blazes. However, when I reached the stream again, I still could not find any more blazes. Now, I am an experienced hiker, and I have hiked many trails over the years. I have been on unmarked trails before and have always been able to find my way through the woods by navigating through the woods in the direction that I needed to go. And I have always managed to make it to where the trail ended. I have the AT map for this section, and I know how to read the contour line for elevation, and I know what direction is north by the location of the sun. So I should have no problem finding my way to the AT, even if I have to bushwhack to it. The map shows that I have to cross a stream, so I took off my boots and socks and crossed the cold stream. I found a white tape attached to a tree and another one further up. Maybe someone had marked this to the AT, so I followed it. After only a short distance, I found no more white tapes. I finally had a signal on my cell phone, and I called Dave and told him what happened to me and that I was now lost. He told me to head back to the road and that he would turn around and drive back to get me. As I was talking to him, I saw 2 more white tapes near me, and I told him to keep heading on the trail and that I had hoped that I would reach the trail. He was not happy with this, and he wanted me to keep calling him with updates. I kept walking through the woods and looking for the white tapes that I hoped would take me to the AT. I reached a ridgeline and had thought that I made it to the AT. I rechecked the map and found that I had to go down to the AT about 100 feet from here. I reached another stream, and the map showed that this might be Roush Creek that would cross the AT. I was happy that I had found it and started to follow the stream. I still had no cell signal here when I reached an area with a lot, and I mean a lot, of fresh bear scat on the ground. The last thing that I wanted to see today was a bear. It is almost 1 o'clock, and I am starting to get upset. I keep moving away from the stream and am not able to follow it as this area is so grown in. I know that this stream is near a shelter, which is why I was following it. However, I keep losing the stream. I am now beginning to panic as I am now lost and Dave has no idea where I am. I should be only about 2 miles from the shelter if I can only find the AT. The stream is totally dried up here and I am tripping over the rocks. I am afraid that I might have to spend the night out here. I know that I can set up an emergency shelter. However, I am worried about Dave because he does not know where I am and he will also be upset and worrying about me. If I could only find the trail. I found an old camp with a rusted pot lid and an old rake. I was thinking that where there is a rake, then there must be a shelter nearby. I found a metal plaque here of a soldier on a horse. There is also an old stone fire pit with a wooden chair, a metal fire poker. I'm not sure if I should stay here, as there is already a nice camp here. This looks promising, as I must be near the trail if someone had camped here at one time. I continued walking and I suddenly heard voices in front of me. It must be the AT. I pushed through the thick rhododendron bushes and was getting all tangled up, but I knew that the trail was right in front of me. I got it. I am on the AT. However, I am not sure where I came onto the AT. Was it after where the Sand Spring Trail that I was supposed to come out onto the AT, or if it was before it? So I did not know which way to go on the trail. I wrote a note on a chopstick paper for Dave. I am on the trail and heading south to the camper. I was moving faster now on the trail for about an hour. A voice in my head told me not to stop until 2:10. Well, at about 2:10, I had reached Sand Spring Trail, which had a sign and the trail had blue blazes. This is obviously not the unknown trail that I was dropped off at, that did not go anywhere. I could hear Dave yelling for me from the Sand Spring Trail. I yelled back down to him that I was on the AT. I walked down the trail and we met up on the Sand Spring Trail. Dave told me that when he was on the AT, that he had asked a hiker if he had seen a female hiker on the trail heading south. When the hiker had told him that he did not see me, Dave said that he was too worried to listen to his audiobook anymore, and he turned it off. He said that he was blaming himself when he had dropped me off and said that he should have hiked in with me to make sure that it was the trail before he left. After I had called him that I was not on the right trail, he had begun to panic. He did not like it that I did not return to the road and told me that we could have hiked out together to Sand Spring Trail and then back to the camper. I guess I was not thinking right when I noticed that I was not on the right trail when Dave had told me to go back to the road and he would pick me up. I decided to bushwhack to the AT because I did not want to ruin the day. And we are supposed to be finishing Pennsylvania this trip. We hiked back out to the camper on the AT together, with Dave walking behind me as it was getting dark. We are both very happy to be back together again. We had about an 8-mile hike back to the camper and were hiking back with our headlamps. I was moving slowly as I was wiped out from the day's adventure. When we got back to the camper, I had remembered the old camp. It was really cool, and it was close to the AT to be an actual camping area. Impressively, I did find my way to the AT using my navigation skills. October 12th, Route 4443 south to Sand Spring Trail. I started on Route 443, a very busy road, and the trail was hard to find. Dave is heading to the Sand Spring Trail. Earlier this morning, we searched Route 325 for Sand Spring Trail and found the trail. It was blazed blue, but again, there are no signs for the trail, so we are hoping that this is the trail. It is in the right area, and it was blazed blue where we found it on the AT. I headed south on the trail. Anyway, I had thought that I had started south on the trail until I crossed under Route 443 again, and then I reached Interstate 84, and the trail followed it to where a bridge crossed a stream and went to Interstate 81. I realized that I was not heading south, I had headed north. I had met a hiker near here who had confirmed that indeed that I had been hiking north for 1.5 of an hour. I had got confused when Dave had dropped me off, and I did not notice the sign that pointed the AT heading both north and south. I walked through a field and then back into the woods and saw a small black snake crossing the trail. And then I reached Rausch Gap. A historical sign here said that this was an abandoned coal mining village. Rausch Creek has a rich history tied to coal mining and transportation, particularly around this now abandoned mining town of Rausch Gap, which thrived mid-1800s, early 1900s as a hub for the Susquehanna and Schuylkill Railroad. I had found some old ruins along the dirt road and some foundations. There was a bridge here that crossed Rausch Creek. Yes, this was the creek that I was trying to follow yesterday that should had brought me here. I reached Rausch Gap Shelter, and Dave was here waiting for me. He told me that he had got a little emotional when he saw the paper that I had left on the trail for him when I had finally found it yesterday. We ate our lunch here and then went back to the trail. The fall colors here are spectacular. A garter snake crossed the trail in front of me as I was walking the trail, second snake that I saw today. I reached Sand Spring Trail, Dave had told me that he was calling for me here yesterday when he reached the trail and was upset because he did not know where I was. He was afraid that I was lost in the woods with no cell phone signal. It was kind of creepy being here where I had got lost on the trail yesterday. I was doing much better today than I was yesterday and had reached the junction at 4:30. We are camping in a parking lot off of Route 443. Dave had to hike the section that I had accidentally went the wrong way on this morning as I set up for dinner in the camper, and he had to hike that section of the trail before he could relax in the camper tonight. October 13th, Route 443 North to Route 645. Dave dropped me off on Route 443 near the bridge that I had hiked to yesterday when he had dropped me off. He then drove over to Route 645, where he will be hiking south this time. I crossed the Swatara Creek on the old iron bridge. I found a large cave that looked like a coal mine after I crossed the bridge. This area is part of Swatara Gap State Park, and I was hiking on Old State Road, a wide old dirt road on a dirt path that went under Interstate 81. I reached some ruins of some old houses. There are a lot of old coal mining villages here on these trails, and you could still find pieces of coal littering the grounds around here. The day was foggy with a 20% chance of rain, which it did rain during my climb up to a ridgeline. Luckily, the climb up was nice with no rocks, like Lehigh Gap was. I met up with Dave on the trail for lunch. He had set up the tarp over us as it was raining here. He told me that he had moved pretty fast to William Penn Shelter as it was mostly on an old dirt road. He said that he had drove up Route 645 and that it was a steep, winding road. As you know, I hate steep, winding roads. He had also said that he had seen 2 deers on the trail and that the shelter was very nice and that it had an interesting composting privy, which he said that he had filmed the entire composting process area. I had needed my music today to keep me motivated on my hike, as there were no views due to the heavy fog, and it was one of my most less favorite sections of the trail. I reached the wide road section of the trail, and the sun had finally come out. I was getting tired, and I did not hike down the steep hill to the shelter. I finally reached Route 645 and the nice big AT parking lot where the camper was parked. This is where we had parked in March. It is very weird being back in the parking lot that we had camped in last year. I drove over to pick up Dave. Always a nerve-wracking experience. I hate these long drive around to do these sections separately, but it is the only way that we can hike these long sections. The trail here is on the ridgeline, so we have to keep driving up and down these roads to get to the trail. October 14th, Route 183 south to Route 501. We camped in a very large parking lot off of Route 183, where we parked in April when we did the one-night backpacking trip. I am heading south from here, a novelty. It was a cold morning with the temperatures in the low 40s. I had on my fleece gloves, my raincoat, and rain pants over my pants. It was a beautiful blue sky day with the smell of fall in the air for our last hike in Pennsylvania. Yes, we are going to be finishing another state on the Appalachian Trail today. I reached a monument for Fort Snyder, just a large boulder with words etched into the boulder. The monument was for the fort that was here during the French-Indian War. The trail then descended steeply to Hertling Campsite with a nice stream and some nice, flat, clear areas that you could set up your tent. I reached Shikellamy Summit Vista with an awesome view of the Pennsylvania farmlands. When I first got here, there were 2 larger birds perched on the boulders that were overlooking the view. At first, I had thought that there were 2 people sitting on the boulders looking at the view. Then they flew away, and I knew that they were turkey vultures. I met up with Dave on the trail, and we sat here on a log and ate our lunch, and then headed back onto the trail. Dave said that the winter privy at the 501 shelter was not well taken care of because it has no door and no toilet seat. I went through a boulder field and past a few section hikers on the trail. One of them was complaining about the rocks. I said that at least it is not muddy like the Vermont Long Trail is. One of the hikers had a brand new backpack, and he looked exhausted from his hike. I reached the 501 shelter. The 501 shelter has a rich history, starting with its creation in the 1930s and 1940s by the Civilian Conservation Corps, volunteer clubs, and local trail organizations. This cabin was designed to provide rustic overnight accommodations for hikers who often traveled the trail in segments, rather than attempting a full through hike. The 501 shelter, known for its unique features and amenities, has been a significant landmark on the trail since its inception. The shelter is near Route 501 and is a nice cabin-style shelter with a big skylight, lots of bunk beds, a large picnic table, and lots of books to read. I drove back to Route 183. I had found a hat in Swatara Gap that Dave had thought had belonged to a northbound hiker that he had seen on the trail today. So we left it here, hoping that he would find it. It is the end of our hike in Pennsylvania, and we did our traditional ending of completing another state. Pennsylvania is done. I am sad that it is over this time and do not know when we will get back onto the Appalachian Trail again, because winter is coming and I might be starting a new job soon, so I may not have the needed time to get this far south on the trail until I have the vacation. Time to hike the southern section of the AT. We were here in the spring when the leaves just started to come out, and now we are here in the fall at the end of the hiking season.